When once you're in that frame of mind, you're high on drugs and whatever. So I think I often hear that people blame other people for the reason they are taking drugs, or is that one of the main causes of them not realizing that we need help?
Do you mean blaming other people and not taking personal responsibility?
Yeah, for themselves. Exactly.
Yeah,
yes.
I mean, it's a complex issue because I think people's lives, are complicated, and the factors which lead people into having addiction and mental health issues are, I think it's not helpful when people blame the individual, because we don't choose to end up in those situations. Nobody chooses that. It's an outcome of a complex interaction of many factors, including the families and societies we're in and the positions we find ourselves in life. But then I think there comes a point where once we realise we do have a problem, then we do have that responsibility to then try to do something about it. And then hopefully the people who we're closest to will understand and support us with that as well, because we really need that.
In your mind, do you think that they need people to get off these habits? Do they need a trigger point? Say, right here, something you found that you can sort of aim at that and say, right, we look forward to that, or otherwise do people just put it off till day after tomorrow and day after tomorrow? Are
you saying, from what I understand, are you saying that if people have got some higher purpose, is that something which can help?
Yeah, I mean, how do you motivate yourself that, I realise that this is not doing my life any good?
Well, for me, I had to hit a very severe rock bottom. Now, that's often a cliche you will hear in addiction circles, recovery circles, that people have to hit rock bottom.
Really?
And that can be very, very hard, obviously, for the family and people who care about them to see that happen, because you want to help and rescue.
Of course.
But sometimes unwittingly families will just simply enable the problem further by trying to protect the individual and not let them reach it. But
what would you advise
I don't know, it's different for different people. Some people wake up to themselves before it gets to that as well.
Yeah. What would you advise, family or friends? What should they do? How should they care about people?
I think they have to try, as hard as it is, with the difficulties that they face when they are loving and caring for someone with an addiction problem, because that comes with lying and it can come with aggression and lots of difficult to manage behaviour. It's trying to find some compassion for that person and not reject them completely, because you do hear of people being rejected completely by the families, and obviously the more people become isolated and alienated from their families or cultures, the worse things can be, and that's more likely to lead to ultimate consequences such as suicide. What I do these days, the reason I come here is I volunteer because I teach guitar.
Just heard you playing guitar, so some interest like this, get the help?
I did, I did play before, I learned to play a long time ago, but obviously when I was in the throes of my addiction I wasn't very interested in it, but since I got clean and after I came out of prison, and then I started to change my lifestyle and started to really address the underlying problems which had been driving me to my behaviour, I started to play my guitar a lot more, and obviously it's a good therapeutic outlet. It's really good to be able to do something creative. It can help to take your mind off things as well, because part of recovery is doing a lot of self-searching and looking at the reasons why you've ended up in the situation you have, and trying to learn from past mistakes, trying to change old habits of thinking and behaving. And that can get quite heavy going as well when you focus in a lot on that. So I think you also need some other kind of outlet or distraction. So a musical instrument, for instance, or learning that is a great way to take your mind off yourself, because you need to have a bit of a healthy break from all the self sort of therapy that you're doing too.
And of course, making use of basic, is it like 5 ways where people can come and meet similar people of the same interest and talking. Does that help?
Yeah, it helps massively, and you find a lot of validation as well, because I know when I burnt all my bridges, luckily my mum and a few old friends who knew me from the past stuck by me, but I found myself in a position where I was having to build my life up from pretty much nothing again. But what you find at places like 5 Ways and other recovery services is you meet people who've been through similar situations as well.
Yes.
They've made a mess of their lives, and that gives you some validation and some acceptance and a sense of being not the only one, and maybe starts to allow you to heal. And there's a lot of shame and guilt to get over as well. That's important, because I think if those things are reinforced by, say, unhelpful family members or relationships,
Yes.
that's the kind of thing which keeps people stuck and can increase the likelihood of relapse. So I think destigmatizing these kind of problems and trying to help people to feel less ashamed, less guilty, and help with more understanding and compassion to help people to be able to move on and grow into, better people than they were before they got into addiction. So,
thank you very much for talking to us, Justin.
Okay, pleasure.
Yeah. And
Thank you.
what else would you like to say about Fireways?
Well, it's a great place. It's not only the serious groups here, because there's a lot of groups which are looking at how to learn to understand and manage emotions, for instance, because that could be a problem with people with it. So I don't know what anybody else has told you about what goes on at Fireways. There's lots of groups. Some of them are sort of looking at things like how to manage emotions better, because that's an underlying common problem with people with addiction problems, is that they often have difficulty regulating and managing difficult emotions like anxiety, anger, low mood. So there's groups here which try to help people to become a bit more psychologically aware and find better coping tactics, better ways to manage their lives so they don't create as much stress. There's, we do things about learning to deal with relationships better, job stress, life stress in general, learning things like mindfulness. And then there's a more creative side, so we've got like my guitar group, and I get people from beginners to more advanced players who come to there. But also, I'm at university at the moment. I'm doing a master's in interdisciplinary psychology.
Right.
So I've already got an undergraduate in psychology, but this is coming from a very different angle from other subjects. I'm about to start my dissertation, and what I'm looking at is the psychology of humour and comedy.
Right.
And what I'm going to do here, which I've agreed with the manager and spoken with some of the service users about, and they're all quite enthusiastic about, is to start like a humour therapy group.
Right.
So I'm not quite sure what form it's going to take yet, but basically it's how we can use humour to help to process some of the difficult things we've been through. Because some of the situation I went through in my extreme behaviour were quite traumatic and difficult at the time, and obviously a lot of shame based. But now I can tell some of these stories in a humorous way, as like humorous anecdotes, and that can be helpful for me because people may laugh and find that funny, so we have a moment of connection. That gives other people a bit of a boost as well. It also demonstrates how you can make something which was previously very difficult to talk about and wanting to deny.
Yes.
You can integrate that into kind of a funny little part of your life narrative. So in the story we all tell ourselves about our life, we can incorporate that rather than push it away where it's damaging, because things don't just go away, they stay in the background unconsciously and come out in all sorts of difficult ways.
Can you tell me how long it took you really to get from here to there? Was there a time it took you so long? Or was there lapses in that when you decided that you want to get away from this?
No. Well, during the 18-month period, which eventually ended up with me going to prison, I was trying to get help. I was going for therapy, personal therapy, which I was paying for, but that wasn't helping. I don't know. I don't think I was in the right place for it.
I see.
It might not be the right therapy. I don't know. I'm not going to blame the therapy my life was messy.
I see.
So I had periods where I wasn't using, and then I thought I was fine and out of the dark, maybe a few months, but then I'd relapse and have a big major binge again and end up in a lot of problems. So it's kind of like a roller coaster for about 18 months.
Really?
But it was the point after coming to prison, after going to prison, I think that 10 weeks gave me time enough to put it far enough behind me to make the best efforts when I got out, to be able to start to put new things in place to make sure I did my best to limit the chances of relapse again. So no, I've not actually had any relapses since.
That's brilliant.
However,
Does it still take efforts, from within yourself to stay away, or?
Not so tempted, but in my particular circumstances, really. But I think it's because of how severe the consequences had become. It did teach me a lesson. I've got to admit, when I first came out of prison, I was tempted for a little while.
Right, I see.
Maybe that first 6 months I was quite vulnerable.
I see.
But I was going to various meetings every day, recovery-based meetings, and keeping myself around people who were living clean, sober, finding new ways to live, and seeing examples of that on a daily basis. So that was important for me. But yeah, some people do have relapses. It can be par for the course. It can be expected. So I'd also advise, other people who care for people who've had addiction problems, maybe to sometimes expect that might be part of what is part of the nature of the process of recovery, and not to maybe overreact too much to.
Yes, I see that.
Because that can also make things a lot worse, obviously, if families and carers react negatively to a relapse. That can just push people into an even worse situation. So
does you need the support from family and friends all the time?
Yeah, of course. And that's not to let people get away with anything, but I think having maybe developing some education around addiction problems, and maybe questioning the knowledge that people might have, and maybe looking at some of the more modern information that's out there about addiction. I think it would be wise for families and carers to educate themselves a little bit and put that bit of effort in.
Yes, I suppose, yeah.
Yeah, rather than just rely on common sense or whatever prejudices they have around.
And a lot of material is available, of course.
More now than ever.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's brilliant.
Okay.
Thank you very much for your time.
It's okay.
We wish you all the best.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.